Today's episode is about the serial killer whose crimes instilled terror in the hearts of residents of Washington State, USA between 1982 and 1988. He was responsible for the murders of at least 49 women, with expectations that his victims numbered up to 71 women. If true, he may be one of the most prolific and brutal killers in American history. His name is Gari Ridgway, the serial killer whom the police enlisted the help of another serial killer to catch. Together, we will explore the dark aspects of Gary's personality and the psychological transformations that led him to develop a killer identity. We will uncover the mystery of his crimes and delve into the moments of horror and suspense in his life. He is a killer whose name is engraved in the dark annals of American crime. Gari Ridgway, the serial killer, was different from many other killers known in America. He boasted about his ability to strangle his victims and then engage in necrophilia, rather than seeking new victims to rape and kill. His first 5 victims were discovered in the Green River, hence his nickname, Green River Killer. He was born in February 1949 in Utah and was the middle child. His childhood and upbringing seemed normal, but from a very early age, he had a sexual attraction to his dominant mother. When he was 11 years old, the family moved from Utah to Washington State. Ridgway was a student with low intelligence and struggled with reading difficulties. When he reached his teens at the age of 16, he lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him in the side, aiming for his liver, to understand the process of stabbing. The boy survived the attack and said that Ridgway walked away laughing. In 1969, at the age of 20, Ridgway was leading a seemingly normal life. He graduated from high school and joined the Navy for 2 years. He also got married to his girlfriend, Claudia Barrows, before going to Vietnam. During his time in the military, he had multiple relationships with prostitutes and contracted a sexually transmitted disease. Although his infection angered him, he did not stop engaging in this behavior. While in Vietnam, his wife had an affair and their marriage ended. After returning from Vietnam, he left the Navy and soon found a job at a factory where he worked for about 3 decades. He got married for the second time in 1973 to Marcia Winslow, and they had their only son, Matthew, in 1975, who was currently serving in the Marines. During this period, Ridgway became a religious zealot, reading the Bible aloud at work and at home. Despite his religious fervor, he wanted to have sex with his wife in public and inappropriate places. He insisted on having sex multiple times a day and continued his illicit relationships with prostitutes throughout his second marriage, which ended after 7 years. Ridgway remained single for about 5 years, and in 1985, he married for the 3rd time to Judith Mawson. The beginning of his crimes was in the dark of night on a day in mid-July 1982. The police in Washington State found the naked body of a girl floating on the surface of the Green River. The victim was Wendy Lee Cofield, a 16-year-old who worked as a prostitute. The subsequent autopsy confirmed that she died from strangulation. At first, the police believed it was an isolated case and did not realize that the discovery of Wendy Lee Cofield's body marked the beginning of a wave of brutal killings that would continue for years. Just 3 months later, another body was found in the Green River. This time, it was a girl named Deborah Bonner, also a prostitute, and she was strangled in the same way as the first victim. It became clear to the police that there was a single perpetrator. The investigations revealed that both victims frequented a street called SeaTac, known for attracting prostitutes and pleasure seekers. The killer might have been one of the clients who visited that street. One day, an American citizen named Robert went on a fishing trip to the Green River, hoping to catch some fish to bring home. As he looked at the water, he noticed what he initially thought was a doll, the naked body of a black woman. But within seconds, he realized it was a real person, and shortly after, he discovered another body floating on the water's surface. He hurried to the riverbank and immediately informed the police about what he had witnessed. The police retrieved the bodies from the Green River and determined that they were young girls between the age of 16 and 18. Detective David Boat began searching the river in a boat, looking for more victims. He soon found the body of a 16-year-old girl in the midst of the weeds. Her death had occurred less than 24 hours prior, and like the previous victims, she was also a prostitute. Fear spread among the residents of American cities, and the police were unable to solve the puzzle of the heinous crimes committed by a cunning and elusive killer. In 1982, the police held a press conference to warn people about the existence of a dangerous serial killer who was hunting and killing his victims. The police discovered some leads. All the victims were prostitutes working on SeaTac Street. The police became convinced that the killer roamed the street to find new victims. A team of detectives was formed to search for the Green River Killer, and the public was urged to provide any information that could lead to his capture. The police grew frustrated with their inability to solve the case, especially when they discovered 2 more bodies of murdered girls in a forest not far from the Green River. Subsequently, they uncovered 7 bodies of prostitutes in rural areas, bringing the total number of victims to 15. The police raided brothels and arrested clients seeking pleasure in a desperate attempt to apprehend the perpetrator, who always seemed to evade capture. During the interrogation of the night girls, a girl came to the police and reported a suspicious client named Gari Ridgway. She described his behavior as strange, which prompted the police to summon him. It was revealed that he was married twice and had a son. The police subjected him to a lie detector test, which he passed, and he denied any involvement in the incident. This led to his release due to a lack of evidence against him. Up to that moment, the police did not know that he was the killer they were searching for. The investigative team responsible for the murder cases created a list of suspects, which included Ridgway as a potential suspect. In the early 1980s, DNA and advanced computer systems did not exist, so the task force had to rely on old-fashioned police work to gather evidence and determine the killer's identity. In October 1983, the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy, who was sitting in his cell awaiting execution, offered to assist the task force in finding the killer. He provided them with insights into the mind of a serial killer. Ted Bundy was able to analyze that the killer the police were searching for felt no remorse towards his victims, but rather took pride in his crimes. This was a common trait shared by both killers. Bundy speculated that the killer might return to the crime scenes to revisit his victims and perhaps engage in necrophilia. Indeed, the investigators decided to set a trap based on this idea. They left one of the victims' graves open, and the killer returned to visit his victim. The police were able to collect the necessary samples to gather evidence about the killer's identity. While the police were trying to reach the killer, in 1985, a mass grave containing 15 bodies of girls was discovered, bringing the total number of bodies found by the police to 30 victims. The leadership of the task force changed in 1987, as did the approach to the investigation. Instead of trying to prove the identity of the serial killer, the task force took the list of suspects and worked on trying to identify the killer. Those who could not be ruled out were moved to a separate list. Ridgway was on this list due to 2 encounters he had with the police in the early 1980s. One in 1980, where he was accused of choking a night girl in his truck near SeaTac Airport, but the charges were dropped. The other encounter was in 1982, and it was later discovered that the girl involved was Kelly McGinnis, one of his victims. The police monitored the suspect and observed him wandering in SeaTac Street and flirting with the night girls. He was apprehended, and samples were taken from him to compare with the victims. When his house was searched, there was no incriminating evidence against him, so he was released, while the samples taken from him were retained. By 2001, the necessary modern technology for DNA analysis became available. The killer's samples were sent to a genetic scientist for analysis, and the scientists confirmed that they matched the victim's samples. He was arrested on November 30th, 2001, as he left his workplace, charged with the murder of 4 women. Later forensic investigations revealed that the same spray paint cans he used in one of his victims were present in another crime scene, linking him to additional murders. During the interrogation, he confessed to committing 48 murders of night girls, dumping most of their bodies in the Green River to eliminate any evidence against him. He misled the police by disposing of the bodies in various locations or wiping them with gum and cigarette butts, even though he didn't smoke or chew gum. He would hunt his victims on SeaTac Street and feel relieved after disposing of each victim. Then, he would have a drink at home. By the end of his trial, Gari Ridgway faced charges of 48 murders. In order to receive a life sentence instead of the death penalty, the Green River Killer agreed to cooperate by revealing the locations of his victims' remains. On November 5, 2003, after his cooperation, Ridgway was sentenced to 48 consecutive life terms. An additional 10 years were added to each sentence for tampering with evidence, resulting in a total additional prison term of 480 years. In 2011, the 49th victim's body linked to Ridgway was discovered, adding another life sentence to his prison term. At the end of his trial, Gari Ridgway had confessed to premeditated murders more than any other serial killer in American history up to that point. He claimed that killing those women was his true occupation. He is still alive at the age of 75 and is expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars. His third wife, Mawson, was shocked when she learned about his long history of rape, murder, and necrophilia. She had no prior knowledge of his crimes until after his arrest, and she had described him as the perfect husband. He treated her like a newlywed even after being together for 17 years. However, she filed for divorce when his trial began. Gari Ridgway later confessed that the idea of killing Mawson tempted him, but he backed down only because killing his wife could raise suspicions about him and increase the likelihood of being caught. He also admitted that he loved her. His killing rate decreased after their marriage, but did not stop. In 2008, Lifetime Films produced a movie based on his story, titled The Capture of the Green River Killer. In the end, we hope you enjoyed the video. And remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notifications bell to receive updates on new content.